Hello, and welcome to Handled Ish Productivity for the Imperfect, a weekly podcast for those that want to elevate their productivity but are not looking for perfection. I'm your host, Betsy, and I am really happy you're here with me, whether it's podcast land or YouTube or on the KC24 CBS 47 Plus app that you can download from your smart TV. Happy as always for everyone who carries the podcast. And this is episode 119. Why change is hard. And I'm laughing because I don't know about you, but I feel like I have conversations a lot with people that kind of center around this whole idea about change being hard, right? Or I don't like change. There was this book, I don't know, a couple of decades ago called Who Moved My Cheese? And it talked about why change is hard, particularly in organizations. And I want to talk today about the idea of why change is hard for individuals. And I've been thinking about this a lot because I think change and habit formation, right, are very interlinked concepts. Obviously, habit formation has a lot to do with productivity, doing the things you want, getting the results you want, having the life you want, right? So change is just part of this whole thing. And I am pretty sure you are like me and you have experienced the fact that change is hard. And weirdly, change is hard, even if it is a change that you want. And I've been really reflecting on that and thinking that one of the reasons that change is hard is because change is very closely linked to your identity, right? So when we are talking about identity, we're talking about something very, very personal. And so when we have a change that impacts our identity, even in a small way, I think that contributes to why it's a little bit difficult. We used to be a person that did X, and now we're not a person that does X. And now we're a person that does Y, or now we're just not a person who does X. And, we used to be this way and now we're this way, or we used to do this and now we do that, or we just don't do that thing anymore. And these are all, big and small things that are linked to our identity, which can be, behavior, like we talked about just a second ago. It can be roles, right? I used to be the person that had this role and now I don't have that role, or my role has changed, or I'm in a new role, right? So all kinds of things. It can have to do with changes in your behavior, changes in your role, changes in your, home, right? I used to be someone who lived here. Now I'm someone who lives here. And again, even if we want the change, right? We wanted to move. We wanted the new role. We wanted to have this particular different behavior. It still is impacting who we believe we are and what our identity is. And our identity is obviously very much linked to our brain and how we think and all that good stuff. And our brains like to be in balance, whether it's in balance with good things or bad things, right? Homeostasis, it's a thing, right? That's, what our body is constantly striving for, and our brain is no different. And there's all kinds of really interesting theories about that. If you believe that your behavior and how you want to be are not linked, that's when you can have cognitive dissonance. And that's a whole another interesting part of brain being in balance. I highly encourage you to look that up if you haven't. Love talking about that with my courses, and kind of a concept I'm obsessed with. And which is why this whole brain being in balance thing and change is hard linked to the identity all kind of swirls together for me. So I'm hopeful that this makes sense. You have things that are part of your identity, your roles, your behaviors, your thoughts, right? You are a person that, has these roles, that does these things and has these thoughts, right? If a change happens, even if you want it, that affects your role or your behavior or your thoughts, sometimes that is often difficult. And as humans, a lot of the time when we are having trouble with change, it is primarily a result of lack of acceptance. So whenever we think that, you know, um, something shouldn't have happened, or it didn't need to happen, or it's stupid that it happened. And again, even if we're adjusting to a role that we wanted, this acceptance fully, right, that I'm in this new role and I'm not in this old role anymore, can cause us a lot of friction and anxiety. And so, step number one in dealing with change is this whole idea of acceptance, right? If you argue against reality, you're going to lose every time. So, whether you wanted the change or not, it happened. And so now it's time to figure out how to make it work for you, which is the second part of this idea. And that is the idea of experimentation and the idea that we might want to choose to have a light touch about this particular change. And I believe, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, that if we look at things with through the lens of experimentation, through the lens of a light touch, it tends to go better for us. When we get very heavy and intense and entrenched, things are not typically great, and nor do they go very well. But when we have this idea of, okay, we're just going to experiment, we're just going to try to figure out how this change can serve us. And so we're going to try on this thought, or we're going to try on this idea, and or we might try this behavior, or whatever it is, right, that you need to experiment with in order to see how this change can serve you, the more likely it is that it's going to become something that we can adapt to, right? Because that's really the whole end result of accepting change, right? Is you have to adapt. Things are like this before, we had the change, so they're not like that before, right? So trying to go back to the way they were, and I'm putting that in quotes, is never a thing because, again, that ship has sailed. So we need to figure out how to adapt. And a good way to do that is to experiment to figure out how that adaptation can serve us. And, as you go through, you might have to do one experiment, right? A thought experiment or a behavior experiment or anything else. And you're like, okay, yeah, this change can serve me. I'm adjusting to this new identity. I'm adapting to the change. Change approved. And we're going to move on with our lives. Sometimes it might take a little longer, right? You might need to experiment for some time about how this change can serve you and how you can adapt to it in a way that makes you comfortable or pleased or happy with your new identity. Or at the very least, willing to work with that new identity in order to make it work for you. Remember, you're in charge. This is your life. And whatever happens externally, right? The most important thing that we can control are our reactions to said external things. And so that's why I think this particular model might work really well. So we have the change. We realize, okay, why is this difficult? What kind of piece of our identity is it affecting? And, how can we kind of think about that to sort of understand why we're having trouble with this, right? And then how can we accept change has happened, ship has sailed, we're not going back to the way we were as much as maybe we want to. Or again, even if this is a change that you sought out yourself, it's a thing. So we need to accept it. And we need to then try this idea of experimentation. How can this change serve us? How can we adapt in a way that will benefit us, that will make us more comfortable or serve us or, make us a little bit more content or happy, all the things. And sometimes the experimentation window will be short. Sometimes it's going to take a little longer. And as we do that with a light touch, thinking, okay, we have this reality now, and we obviously want to live our lives in the most pleasant way possible. How can we merge all of that together? And then change is going to be a little bit easier. It's never going to be easy. Change and identity are interlinked in a way that makes our brain struggle because they want to be in balance, right? They want it to be, status quo, right? That's how we're created as humans. Status quo is not the way that life works, though, as you know. Things are constantly changing. We have to constantly adapt. And so railing against the change, railing against the identity shift never serves us. So the sooner we can go from identifying what's happening, what's the identity shift that we're struggling with, acceptance, experimentation, adaptation that helps us. So those are some ideas that I'm encouraging you to think about this week. And I'm curious if you've ever sort of thought about change in this way and what you do with that information and how it impacts you and how it helps you. So I would love to hear what you think. So that's the scoop. And I hope, as always, you have the most amazing week. And please rate, review, recommend, right? The 3 R's, this podcast to help other folks find it. And remember, you are doing way better than you think you are. Trust me.